Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Welcome to the video on how to write down the lab report for experiment 1 SK025, the rate of reaction. By now you have done the experiment. So next step what you need to do is to write down the lab report. In the lab report, what you should have is the name, metric number and class. Next is the title. The title depends on from the lab manual here, you can see that the title is rate of reaction. So that is what we're going to write down in the title in our lab report. Next is the objective. The objective, you should refer to the objective from the lab manual itself. So here we can see the objective. The objective here, it mentioned that at the end of the lesson, students should be able to study the effect of concentration, temperature, and catalyst on the reaction rate. Okay, but then in the lab manual, instead of in the lab report, instead of you write down all the words here, we're going to start from here. To study the effect of concentration, temperature, and catalyst on the reaction rate. Okay, but then what I have written down here, I have divided further the objective into 3 lah. To study the effect of 1 Roman concentration, 2nd Roman temperature, 3rd Roman catalyst. Okay, why? Because when we write down the conclusion at the end of the lab report, the conclusion we have to answer the objective again. Okay, so when I write down here, when I divide it into 3, so that it will be easier for you to see that for your conclusion, you need to have 3 conclusion as well. Okay, so that is for the objective. Next is the theory. The theory depends on the introduction of your lab manual. Okay, so here from the introduction, we can see that we have these 2 paragraphs about the rate of reaction. So you're just gonna write down, copy paste all the information. Okay, you don't have to do summary. You don't have to change it into past tense or passive words. It's just that you're just gonna copy paste it into the theory in your lab report. Next is the procedure for the lab report. The procedure again must depends from the procedure of your lab manual, but then for the lab report itself, you have to change it into a passive sentences. Okay, and then make sure the passive sentences must be in past tense, because actually you have done the experiment, so that's why we have to change it into past tense. Okay, so for example here, I have done all for the procedure for part A. So for example, number 1 from the lab manual, it mentioned that place 50 ml of 0.2 molar sodium thiosulfate using a burette into a 100 ml conical flask. So here I have changed it into passive sentences and I have made sure that it is a past tense. So here I changed that 50 ml of 0.2 molar sodium thiosulfate was placed into a 100 ml conical flask using a burette. Okay, so the first sentence here, so you have changed it into past tense. Make sure the second sentences, we have to make it passive and change it into past tense as well. Okay, so here I have written down the conical flask was put on the white paper with the X mark. Okay, so that's for number 1. Number 2 here is pipette 10 ml of 0.1 molar HCl into the conical flask. Okay, so here I have changed it into passive 1. 10 ml of 0.1 molar HCl was pipetted into the conical flask. Okay, and here I mentioned that immediately start the stopwatch. So here I have changed it into passive sentences. The stopwatch was started immediately. Okay, the next sentence here, stir continuously with a glass rod until the mark is no longer visible and record the time. So I have changed it to be the solution was stirred continuously with the glass rod until the mark was no longer visible. And from the record the time here, I'm going to change it into the time was recorded. Okay, for the note here, you have to include as well in the lab report. But then here, I didn't change anything. The note here, I'm just going to copy paste from my lab manual. Number 3, repeat steps 1 till 2 with the addition of distilled water to the sodium thiosulfate as instructed in table 1.1. So here, step 1 and 2 was repeated. So here I changed the repeat step 1 till 2 with steps 1 and 2 was repeated. Okay, however, for the table 1.1 here, as you can see, we have a lot of information. Okay, we have lots of information. Time, here we have time n1 over t and the concentration. But what I would like you to write down, because this is actually, you're going to write down all of this again in your result. So what I would like you to do is actually, you're going to write down, because this is the procedure, you want to know how many volume of the solution needed to make the solution. The concentration, the time, and the 1 over t is not needed yet during the procedure. So again, I have changed it. Again, I'm going to include only 1, 2, and this, the third information. So here I have written down in terms of this one. It's like this. First table, volume of sodium thiosulfate. The second one is volume of distilled water. Next is volume of 0.1 molar HCl solution. Okay. It's not that I'm going to ignore this one. Okay, this table is actually, I'm going to redraw again during the results. Okay, for the procedure, I only want this 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that is for steps number 3. Step number 4 is to calculate the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate after the dilution and the value of 1 over t. So here I have changed it into pensive sentences, where the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate after the dilution and the value of 1 over t was calculated. Okay, what does it mean here by calculate the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate solution after the dilution? So this one is actually, so here is actually the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate solution after the dilution. Okay, during the result, I will show you how to calculate this value. Okay, this is actually, so for steps number 6 ni, here, you're going to change it, make sure you change it. This is actually number 6, because the previous one is number 5. So this one actually, there's a rata here, so here is supposed to be number 6 lah. Okay, so here based on the graph, state the relationship between the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate with time and the rate of reaction. So again, I have changed it into a passive sentences, so you're just going to write down this one lah. So for number 6 here, state the relationship between the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate with time and the rate of reaction. Actually, we're going to answer in our conclusion itself. Okay, so you're just going to write down all the information. Okay, so that is for part A. Next, we're going to look for the procedure for part B, which is the effect of temperature and catalyst on the reaction rate. So for step number 1 until number 8 here, I believe you could try yourself. Okay, let's look together into step number 9. So step number 9 is follow steps 2 till 7 for the temperature of 35, 40, and 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, so record yourself in table 1.2. However, in the lab report for the procedure, you should only write down steps 2 till 7 was followed for the temperature of 35, 40, and 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, and then here record your results here. I'm just going to write down the results were recorded. Okay, again, for the table 1.2 here, you don't have to write down in your procedure lah, because later on we're going to redraw the table again in your result. Okay, so that's why it's until here. Okay, next step is number 10. Plot 1 over t against temperature for the mixture of A1 plus B1 and A2 plus B2 solution on the same graph. So here I have changed it. The graph of 1 over t against the temperature for the mixture were plotted on the same graph. Okay, and the last one, based on the graph, deduce the relationship between number 1, temperature and the rate of reaction. Number 2, catalyst and the rate of reaction. Okay, so here what I change is actually here lah. Based on the graph here, the relationship were deduced between 1 Roman, temperature and rate. Number 2 Roman, catalyst and rate of reaction. So that is for the procedure. So again, for procedure, you can't copy paste straight away from the lab manual. You have to change it into pensive sentences where it must be in past tense. Next, what you need to include is the result. So again, we're going to divide into two, part A, part B. Part A, the effect of concentration on the reaction rate. So for the result itself, what you're going to do is actually you're going to just copy paste this table 1.1 here. Okay, so based upon the experiment, the time recorded there, you're going to include it in this table, time, and then you can calculate the 1 over t here. Okay, so make sure again the time must be in second. Okay, next is the concentration. Based on the table, okay, we're gonna fill up these two. How about the concentration? The concentration can be found out using the formula of M1V1 equal to M2V2. This is a formula of a dilution, where actually what happened here is we're gonna dilute the 0.2 molar of our sodium thiosulfate, because as you can see, here we have different value of the Na2SO3 and different value of water. So what happened here is actually we're going to dilute the solution. So how we're going to calculate the concentration of Na2SO3, the diluted solution? So let us calculate together. So I'm just going to show the first two examples here, 1, 2. So again, we're going to use formula M1V1 equal to M2V2. M1V1 is actually the initial one, the concentrated one. M2V2 is our diluted version, which we're going to calculate. So M1V1, what is M1? Is the initial concentration of sodium thiosulfate, which based on the table itself, it is given 0.2 molar. Volume 1 is the volume of Na2SO3 solution. Again, from the table here lah, your most left hand side. Okay, so this is the value for M1V1. Okay, M2V2. M2 is actually our unknown, the concentration of the diluted Na2SO3. Okay, and the volume of the diluted, this is volume of Na2SO3 diluted. How are we going to find out here? It mentioned that V2 is the volume of Na2SO3 solution plus distilled water. Okay, so I'm just going to show you first example. So first, I'm going to find out this one. So this means that here is my M2. Okay, again, M1V1, we're going to use from here. So first, I'm going to write down the A1 lah. M1 0.2, V1 is 50. So 0.2 times 50 equal to M2 is our unknown. V2 is the volume of Na2 plus distilled water. Okay, 50 plus 0 will be equal to 50. So when we calculate, we get M2 to be 0.2 molar. So I'm just going to write down this will be 0.2. So how about the next one? Okay, so again, we're still going to use M1V1 equal to M2V2. M1 is the concentrated based upon this table. So M1 is 0.2, V1 is 40. So 0.2 times 40. M2 is our unknown. Okay, V2 is again volume of Na2SO3 plus distilled water, which is 40 plus 10 will be 50. So this value here will be get 0.16 molar. So this is actually how you calculate the concentration of the diluted solution. The diluted solution is actually our M2. Okay, so this one here is actually 0.12, here 0.08, here 0.04. But then again, you should try yourself first. Okay, so that is for the result for part A. That is actually only for the calculation part for result for part A. Okay, so we have calculated the value of concentration here, concentration of Na2SO3 molar, and I hope you have calculated the value of 1 over T here. So for number 5, we can see that here, plot a graph of 1 over T against the concentration of sodium thiosulfate solution. Okay, so you're going to plot a graph. So here 1 over T will be your y-axis. The concentration of sodium thiosulfate solution will be x-axis. Okay, so you're going to take the value from which part? Okay, so from this concentration and this 1 over T, again, this will be your y. This one will be your x-axis. Okay, so what your graph should look like. So let's look for the example. Okay, so for the graph, what is needed in the graph itself? Okay, number one, you need to have your title. So the title is that a graph of 1 over T versus our concentration of sodium thiosulfate. So this is our y-axis, this is x-axis. Okay, so 1 over T, since the time taken that we have recorded is in seconds, so the unit of 1 over T must be per second. Okay, and the x-axis is the concentration of sodium thiosulfate. The unit will always be molar, so capital M. Okay, so once you have write it down, then you have to plot the graph lah. So once you plot the point minimum, or the point is actually 5. Okay, and then you have to connect the point there. Okay, so we have 5 points. Okay, the best solution is actually if your straight line here meet all the 5 points. Okay, but then since this is your experiment, minimum is actually if the line meets 2 point lah. Tapi sebenarnya lagi banyak point lagi bagus lah graph kamu tu kan. But if only we have 2, then you just gonna take 2 lah. Okay, so this graph is actually just to show what is the relationship between 1 over T and the concentration. Okay, so that is for graph for part A. Okay, the last step for the procedure part A, number 6, based on the graph, state the relationship between the concentration of sodium thiosulfate solution with time and the rate of reaction. So what does it mean? It's actually, you're going to state 2 relationships. The first one is the relationship between the sodium thiosulfate, the concentration with time. So that is the first one. Okay, the second one, you have to state the relationship between the concentration of sodium thiosulfate solution with the rate of reaction. Okay, so how can we see the relationship between the sodium thiosulfate with time? Okay, so again, you can see based upon your table of result lah. Okay, so from your own table of result, okay, so you should see what is the relationship between the concentration here and the time taken. Okay, so here I'm just going to write down. Okay, so it is up to you. The higher boleh, the lower the concentration. So here you have to write down the higher or the lower the time taken. Okay, the time taken is what? The time taken needed for the solution to be cloudy or the X mark solution to disappear. Okay, it is actually up to your own result. Okay, so where you should look based upon you can see the relationship between these two lah. Okay, between these two. Okay, so that's the first relationship. Okay, the second one, again, we want to know the relationship between the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate solution with the rate of reaction. So again, we're going to see the concentration of sodium thiosulfate, still this value. Okay, the rate of reaction is actually, okay, this value, 1 over T value. Okay, so you have to write down the relationship here. So it's up to you. You want to write down the higher the concentration or the lower the concentration. But then again, it depends. And then make sure it is the correct one lah. So what will happen to the rate of reaction? Okay, so that is all for the part or the result for part A. Next is for the part B. For the result of part B, again, what you have to do is you have to redraw again all the tables here. It's just that based upon our experiment, we only did 3 temperature where we have done the 30, 40 and 50. So based upon the lab manual, it's only 30, 35, 40, 50. Okay, we don't have any 35, so we're going to take 30, 40 and 50. Okay, so again, take your time, make sure it must be in second. The same goes for A1, B1 and A2, B2. And then you have to find 1 over T. Okay, so that is for the table, where you have to complete the table first. Okay, next is the same one where first we have to plot 1 over T. Number 10 here, plot 1 over T against temperature. So again, this will be our y-axis, this will be our x-axis for the mixture of A1 plus B1 and A2 plus B2 solution. Okay, so okay, how to plot the graph or what is the example of the graph? So next, I'm going to show you what is the general view of the graph itself. For graph of part B, again, what you need to have is your title, a graph of 1 over T versus temperature. Again, 1 over t, since the unit taken for the time is second, so here will be second to the power of -1. Okay, so for the temperature, okay, since we have in degrees Celsius, okay, so we have to write down lah. Make sure the x-axis, the time, okay, the axis or the unit must be written as well. Okay, since this is the general one, so I don't have any value here lah, but then for you, you should write down the value. Okay, so again, since the procedure asks us to, based on the same graph, we have to plot a graph for A1 plus B1 and A2 plus B2 on the same graph. So when you plot the graph there, you have to label lah which one is A1 plus B1, which one is A2 plus B2. Okay, so that is the example for graph of part B. After you have plotted the graph, okay, the next or the last procedure for the experiment 1 here, for number 11, based on the graph, deduce the relationship between the first, number 1, temperature and rate of reaction, number 2, catalyst and the rate of reaction. Okay, so here for number 1, so I'm just going to write down, okay, even though it does not mention about the rate of reaction or the time taken, so I'm just going to write down lah. Okay, so what happened to the temperature? Okay, so when you see the value, then you can see what is the relationship lah. Okay, so for example, the higher the relationship, okay, is it the lower the time taken or the higher the time taken? Okay, again, the same relationship where we're going to see based upon the temperature, but now next we're going to see the factor, we're going to discuss between what is the relationship between the temperature and rate of reaction. Okay, so this is for 1 Roman, temperature and rate of reaction. Okay, here number 11 2 Roman, we have to deduce the relationship between the catalyst and rate of reaction. Okay, based on the catalyst, we cannot say that the higher the catalyst, the higher the rate of reaction. It is not, because actually from this experiment, A1, B1, we don't have any catalyst. A2, B2, we have catalyst. So we have to tell, okay, what happened if there's the presence of catalyst? Will it increase or decrease the rate of reaction? Okay, so that is all for the result for the experiment. Next, what you have to write down is the discussion. So for the discussion, you're going to answer your here point to discuss, number 1 and 2. So here, number 1, I write down what does 1 over T represent and what is the function of the catalyst in the above reaction. So again, you have to answer it in the discussion. And then the most important part is actually the possible error and the precaution. Okay, so for the possible error, minimum is actually what you have to give is actually 2. But then it is recommended for you to write down more than 2. Okay, so possible error you have to think by yourself. But then from the precaution, I will give you the answer. But then again, for the possible error and precaution, it is based upon the procedure itself. Part A here, actually we have the measurement of our sodium thiosulfate into the burette, and as well as the measurement of 10 ml of HCl into our pipette. So that's why for the precaution here, I write down that we have to measure the volume of solution accurately. Okay, next, based upon the procedure, we have stir continuously with a glass rod until the mark is no longer visible. So the precaution here that we have to stir the solution properly with the glass rod. Okay, next precaution that we could have here, based on the notes here, it mentioned that the X mark should be observed from the top of the conical flask. So that could be our precaution. Okay, the next one, because from the procedure, it mentioned that to immediately start the stopwatch, okay, and then record the time when the mark is no longer visible. Okay, so here my precaution is that the stopwatch starts simultaneously when the reaction starts. Okay, so that is from the experiment of part A. Okay, so for the part B here, so what we could have here, because for experiment B, we have mentioned about water bath. So here I've written down that the temperature of water bath is kept constant. If you want to write down the precaution is to label the boiling tube. It could be included in the precaution, which is to label the boiling tubes. It is acceptable as well lah. So again, the possible error, actually you could take it from here lah. So contohnya, measure the volume of solution accurately. So the possible error, do not measure the volume accurately or do not stir the solution properly. Okay, so I don't want the answer to be parallax error. For those who write down parallax error, I'm just gonna write down no. Please, because we have actually, what does it mean by parallax error here? Okay, so you have to be more specific. So actually you could write down based upon the procedure itself. Okay, so that is for the discussion. Okay, last but not least, we're going to discuss about the conclusion of the experiment. Okay, so the conclusion, again, we want to answer back the objective of the experiment itself lah. So what is the objective of the experiment? So the objective of the experiment is to study the effect of concentration, temperature and catalyst on a reaction rate. So actually we have answered this in our result. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down again in my conclusion, because again in conclusion we have to explicitly mention what does the objective want. Okay, so when we want to see the effect or the relationship between concentration on the reaction rate, so I'm just going to write down here lah. So the higher the concentration of our sodium thiosulfate, what will happen to the rate of reaction? So that is for the concentration. Next for the temperature. So again, it's up to you. You want to write down the higher or the lower the temperature. Okay, what will happen to the rate of reaction? So that is the second objective. And the last one is the presence of catalyst lah. What will happen to the reaction rate? So you have to write down here the presence of catalyst, will it increase or decrease? So it's just that for the conclusion, I've written down a number in terms of 1, 2, 3. Here I have written down in terms of 1 Roman, 2 Roman, 3 Roman. So that is not the problem. So if you want to write down this one in terms of 1 Roman, 2 Roman, 3 Roman point, it's fine. The most important part is actually you have to answer back what is the objective of the experiment. If you only answer the objective is achieved, then you won't get any mark lah. So actually if the objective we have three objective, then usually this one we will get 3 marks. So if you only write down objective is achieved, then you will not get any marks, because we have to be specific what is meant by objective is achieved. Okay, so that is the end of the video on how to write down the lab report for experiment 1 SK025.